You know what captivates me about Social Security? It's not merely the figures, it's not even the approach. It's the reality that one of the most significant financial choices you'll ever face doesn't seem like a choice at all until suddenly it is. Because somewhere around age 62, something subtle but meaningful occurs. A window opens. And most people don't realize that stepping through that window too soon or hesitating too long can define the rest of their financial journey in ways they never anticipated. Here's the difficult reality. About two-thirds of Americans claim Social Security the instant they're eligible, age 62, not because it's necessarily the wisest move, but because it's the most apparent one. It feels accessible, it feels deserved, it feels like, well, why not? But what if I told you that this moment, this apparently straightforward choice, is actually one of the most misinterpreted financial decisions you'll ever encounter? And not because people aren't attempting to get it right, but because the framework itself is complicated. Even the professionals don't always agree. Financial consultants will tell you one thing, online communities will tell you another. And the Social Security Administration itself once developed a calculator to help people navigate this decision, and then quietly discontinued it. Why? Because people were utilizing it incorrectly. Think about that. A resource designed to guide people through a life-shaping financial decision became so misinterpreted that it was pulled away. That tells you everything you need to understand. This isn't a straightforward right or wrong decision. It's a profoundly personal one. And today I want to guide you through it differently. Not just with figures, but with understanding. Not just with concepts, but with real-life reasoning. Because the question isn't, should you claim Social Security at 62? The real question is, when does claiming it at 62 actually make sense for you? Let me offer you a way to consider this that might change everything. Imagine your Social Security benefit as a spigot. Behind that spigot is a pipeline, one you've been filling your entire working life. Every paycheck, every tax payment, it all creates pressure in that pipeline. Now, here's how it functions. The longer you wait to open the spigot up, the greater the pressure becomes. Wait until 70, the stream is powerful. Open it at 62, the stream is lighter. But here's the part most people don't consider. That spigot belongs to you. You contributed to it, and if you wait too long to open it up, some of that water never reaches you. It just remains in the pipeline, untapped, lost. No reimbursements, no second chances. So the real question becomes, when do you open the spigot up so you actually receive what you've earned? Now, before we explore the emotional side of this decision, we need to anchor ourselves in something practical. Let's discuss the actual numbers, because behind all of this is a mathematical truth that most people oversimplify. Let's picture someone. We'll call him Pat. Pat spent his career earning a respectable income, about $90,000 in his final working year. Not extremely wealthy, not struggling, just a typical hardworking professional. Now, Pat has three options. He can apply for Social Security at 62 and receive about $2,038 per month. He can wait until his full retirement age around 67 and receive about $3,198 per month. Or he can postpone all the way to 70 and receive roughly $3,986 per month. At first look, it seems obvious, doesn't it? Wait longer, receive more. Simple. But life is seldom that simple, because the real question isn't just how much you receive each month. It's how much you accumulate over your lifetime. And that's where things begin to shift. Let's walk through what's known as a break-even analysis. This is the fundamental calculation most people reference. If you take Social Security early, you receive smaller payments but for more years. If you wait, you receive larger payments but for fewer years. At some point, those two approaches cross. That crossover point, typically somewhere in your early 80s, is where the total lifetime benefits balance out. So, if you live beyond that, postponing tends to win. If you live a shorter life, claiming it early can actually place more money in your pocket. Now, here's where it gets compelling. Most people assume life expectancy is around 79, but that's life expectancy at birth. If you've already reached a 62 without major health concerns, the numbers change. The Social Security Administration estimates your life expectancy is closer to 84. That's a significant difference, and it transforms the math entirely. Let's go back to Pat. If Pat claims at 62 and lives to 84, he could accumulate around $615,000 in total benefits. But if he waits until 67, he accumulates less overall. In fact, claiming early could leave him about $72,000 ahead. That surprises many people because we've been trained to believe that waiting is always superior. But here's the reality. A small shift in assumptions can completely reverse the outcome. Reduce Pat's life expectancy by just 3 years from 84 to 81, and suddenly waiting becomes the superior decision. Drop it to 78. Now the difference nearly disappears, and the optimal approach might actually fall somewhere in the middle. Not 62, not 70, but somewhere like 65. And this is where we need to pause because this is the moment where the assumption breaks. You think this decision is about selecting the best age, but it's not. It's about something much more uncertain. It's about not knowing how long you'll live. And no spreadsheet, no calculator, no advisor can resolve that for you. That uncertainty, that's the real variable. That's the entire challenge. Now let's layer in something most people completely disregard: inflation, or more precisely, the cost of living adjustment. Every year, Social Security benefits are modified to keep up with inflation. And here's where the math becomes quietly significant. If your monthly benefit is larger because you waited, then your annual increases are also larger. It's compounding. A 3% increase on $3,966 is very different from a 3% increase on $2,238. Over time, that gap doesn't just expand, it accelerates. And when you calculate this properly, the difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 isn't just tens of thousands of dollars. It can be hundreds of thousands. We're talking about a potential difference of $246,000 over a lifetime. That's not a rounding error. That's a life-altering number. So now you're probably thinking, okay, so I should simply wait, right? Not so fast. Because life isn't experienced in spreadsheets. It's experienced in moments, in health, in relationships, in timing. And there are very real, very rational circumstances where taking Social Security at 62 isn't just acceptable, it's the wisest move you can make. Not emotionally, logically, strategically, practically. And that's what I want to guide you through next. The 7 circumstances where claiming early actually makes sense. Not because it's popular, but because it's right for the right person in the right moment. Let's begin with the first one, and it's the one people hesitate to mention out loud: your health or your family history. Because here's the reality we don't want to confront. If your father passed away at 73, if your grandfather didn't survive past 71, if you've already experienced a serious health event, then your timeline may not match the averages. And the averages are what most financial guidance is built on. Waiting for a larger monthly payment only works if you're around long enough to receive it. Otherwise, you're leaving value on the table. Value you earned, value you contributed for. This isn't negativity, it's realism. And in this case, realism isn't discouraging. It's empowering because it allows you to make a decision based on your life, not someone else's assumption. Now, here's where the discussion starts to shift, because not every reason to claim early is about risk. Some are about living. And that brings us to the second reason. You want to savor your retirement while you still can. And I want to be very direct about this. This is not an emotional argument. It's a practical one because retirement doesn't unfold in a straight line. It unfolds in phases. There's what some people call the go-go years. The early years of retirement when you're active, energized, curious. You travel, you explore, you say yes to things you've been deferring for decades. Then come the slow go years. You're still living well, but with more limitations. And finally, the no-go years, when your world becomes smaller, quieter, more restricted. Now, here's the question nobody asks. Is a dollar at 63 the same as a dollar at 83? Mathematically, yes. Experientially, not even close. I once heard a story about a man who did everything right. He worked hard. He saved diligently. He delayed gratification at every turn. He retired in his early 70s with more money than he ever envisioned. Financially secure, finally free. But within 2 years, his life became a sequence of medical appointments. The energy he thought he'd have wasn't there. The adventures he planned never materialized. The money was still there, but the life he imagined spending it on had changed. That's not a financial failure, that's a timing disconnect. And sometimes the wisest financial decision you can make is to synchronize your money with your life, not just your longevity. Now, the third reason claiming at 62 can make perfect sense isn't about you alone. It's about your household. Because Social Security isn't just an individual decision, it's a coordinated one. And that brings us to your spouse. Reason 3, claiming early can activate spousal benefits. Here's something surprisingly few people completely understand. If your spouse didn't work long enough to qualify for a substantial Social Security benefit, or if their earnings were significantly lower than yours, they may be eligible for spousal benefits, up to 50% of your full retirement age benefit. But there's a condition. They can't receive that benefit until you file. Let that register. You might be sitting there waiting patiently, postponing your benefit until 70 because that's what the traditional wisdom says. Meanwhile, your spouse is receiving nothing. Zero. Not because they don't qualify, but because you haven't activated the switch. And this is where the discussion changes from what's best for me to what's best for us. Because in many households, especially where one partner spent years raising children or working part-time, the income disparity is real. And Social Security was created to help address that gap, but only if you utilize it correctly. I've witnessed this scenario unfold more times than you'd expect. A couple sits down with a financial planner. The higher earning spouse is told, postpone until 70. It maximizes your benefit. And that guidance in isolation is technically accurate, but no one pauses to ask, what about the spouse sitting right beside them? What about the years of income they're forgoing? What about the total household picture? Because when you step back, claiming early might not diminish your strategy. It might actually strengthen it. Now let's move into one of the most disregarded and honestly one of the most impactful strategies in this entire discussion. Reason 4, your spouse has a serious health condition. This is where Social Security planning stops being theoretical and becomes deeply personal. Because sometimes the decision isn't about maximizing income over decades. It's about managing a reality you didn't prepare for. Here's how this operates. If your spouse is the higher earner and they have a serious or terminal health condition, the math shifts dramatically because when they pass away, you become eligible for survivor benefits. And those survivor benefits are based on their higher income, not yours. So now consider the strategy. Instead of waiting, you claim for your own benefit at 62. You begin receiving something, your benefit, while your spouse is still alive. Then when your spouse passes, you transition. You step into their larger benefit. What have you accomplished? You've secured income during a period where otherwise you would have received nothing. You've essentially built a bridge, one that safeguards your financial life during an incredibly challenging emotional time. This isn't merely a financial strategy. It's a thoughtful one because it acknowledges something many plans overlook. Life doesn't always follow the anticipated timeline. And when it doesn't, adaptability matters more than perfection. Now, let's change direction because the next reason has nothing to do with health and everything to do with timing. Reason 5, the stock market declines. This is one of those concepts that once you grasp it, you can't unlearn it. And yet almost nobody discusses it outside of advanced financial planning settings. Imagine you've just retired. You're depending on your investment portfolio to fund your lifestyle, and then out of nowhere, the market drops 40%. Or 50%. We've witnessed it happen before and will witness it again. Now you're in a challenging position. You need income. But to produce that income, you have to sell your investments. And if you sell during a downturn, you're cementing in losses. Losses that could take years, sometimes decades, to bounce from. This is what financial professionals call sequence of returns risk. And it's one of the greatest dangers to a retirement plan. Not because the market decreases, but because you're compelled to withdraw money while it's down. Now, here's where Social Security becomes more than merely a benefit. It becomes a mechanism. If you claim early, you create a guaranteed income stream, a floor, a cushion. You reduce or even eliminate the need to sell investments at the worst possible time. You're not responding to the market anymore. You're providing it time, space, a chance to rebound. And there's an even more fascinating angle to this. If you're not yet drawing from your portfolio and the market crashes, you can actually deploy your Social Security income to invest in the market at lower prices. Think about that. You're effectively utilizing government-backed income and deploying it when assets are discounted, when fear is elevated, when opportunity is greatest. That's not careless. That's strategic. That's the kind of move that appears obvious in retrospect, but requires awareness in the moment. Now let's discuss something less apparent, but just as significant: taxes. Reason 6. Tax planning and timing. This is where Social Security planning connects with something many people underestimate: tax efficiency. Here's the truth. Up to 85% of your Social Security benefits can be taxable, but whether they are and how much is determined by your total income. Now, consider this. There's often a period in retirement where your income is temporarily lower. Maybe you've retired, but you haven't started taking required minimum distributions yet. Maybe you're between income sources, maybe your taxable income is unusually low. That period. It's an opportunity because if you begin receiving Social Security during that time, your benefits may be taxed minimally or not at all. But fast forward a few years, once required minimum distributions start in, typically in your 70s, your taxable income increases and suddenly your Social Security benefits are being taxed at a greater rate. So by claiming earlier, you're not merely receiving income, you're controlling your tax exposure. You're distributing income across years in a more efficient way. And that's something many people overlook because they focus on how much they receive instead of how much they retain. Now let's discuss the final reason, and it's the one that warrants the most sincerity. Reason 7. You genuinely need the money. There's no strategy here, no optimization, no spreadsheet, just reality. Life occurs unexpectedly, unfairly, sometimes all at once. Medical expenses, job loss, family obligations, economic changes, things you couldn't have foreseen and couldn't have prepared for perfectly. And in those moments, Social Security isn't merely a benefit. It's a safety net, a foundation, a program designed to support you when you need it most. So if you need the money, claiming it is not a mistake. It's not a failure. It's not compromising. It's utilizing the system exactly as it was designed. And sometimes the wisest financial decision isn't the most optimized one. It's the one that provides you stability. Now let's bring all of this together with a real-life example because this is where everything connects. Imagine a woman, let's call her Sandra. She's 62, recently retired. Her husband is 65. He has a higher Social Security benefit, but also a serious heart condition. Sandra's benefit at 62 about $2,100 per month. If she waits until 67, it increases to around $2,900 and $800 of difference. On paper, waiting seems like the clear choice. But here's what happens. Her husband passes away at 69. If Sandra had waited to claim, she would have received nothing from her own benefit for 7 years. Then, after his passing, she would switch to his survivor benefit anyway. But instead, she claims at 62. She receives her benefit for those 7 years. That adds up to roughly $176,000. $176,000 that would have otherwise been left untouched, uncollected, lost. And when her husband passes, she transitions to his larger benefit. That's the strength of timing. Not perfect timing, not predicted timing, responsive timing. Now, to be balanced, there are absolutely circumstances where waiting makes more sense. If you're in excellent health, if you have robust savings, if your spouse also has a high benefit, if your portfolio isn't producing high returns, then postponing can act like a guaranteed return, sometimes equivalent to 8% annually, and that's incredibly valuable. But now we arrive at the real question. Not what's the ideal age to claim, but what's the best decision for your life right now? Because this isn't a one-size-fits-all problem. It's a profoundly personal equation, one that encompasses your health, your family, your finances, your timing, your priorities. And here are 3 actionable takeaways to direct you. First, don't rely on a single outcome. Run your numbers. Then adjust your life expectancy by a few years, higher or lower. Watch how quickly the best answer shifts. If it changes easily, that tells you something important. There is no single perfect decision, only a range of reasonable ones. Second, think as a household, not an individual. If you're married, your Social Security approach is interconnected. Spousal benefits, survivor benefits, timing decisions, they all influence each other. And overlooking that can cost you more than you realize. Third, stay adaptable. Your plan isn't carved in stone. If the market shifts, if your health changes, if your income fluctuates, those are indicators, moments to reevaluate, not moments to rigidly adhere to a plan made years ago. And maybe the most crucial thing to remember is this. The Social Security Administration discontinued their own calculator because people were treating a starting point as a final answer. Don't repeat that. Don't compress this decision to a formula because your life is greater than a formula.